Hello and welcome to Let's Review Call of Cthulhu. Before we dive down into the deep dark waters of madness once more, I'd like to get one thing out of the way. Most of these clips are going to be from the finale because I didn't think to save any more of them, and I figured that going out and recording new ones might delay this, so apologies for that. I will try and do better in the future. And with that out of the way, let us begin our final descent into madness for now. Now, the first thing we'll be discussing is the story, so if you do not want the story to be spoiled for you, I'm going to give you a chance to skip to the time that's going to be on the screen. The story centers around private investigator Edward Pierce, a former soldier suffering from PTSD who self-medicates with whiskey and sleeping pills. One day, the father of a woman named Sarah Hawkins shows up and demands that he look into the case of his daughter and determine what exactly happened, because he knows that she is not actually crazy like the newspapers say, and that she would never set fire to her own home, especially if it meant it would kill her husband and her son. In order to entice the detective into taking the case, the father brings with him a painting that had been sent to him, he believes, by Sarah after the night of the fire, meaning that she might still be alive. Edward agrees to take the case and immediately sets sail for Darkwater Island, a small island off the coast of Boston. Upon arriving on the island of Darkwater, Edward agrees to meet with a man named Captain Fitzroy, the only owner of a ship still capable of sailing between the mainland and Darkwater Island itself. Captain Fitzroy allows Edward to take a look at the shipping manifest for the Hawkins warehouse. Upon reading it, Edward notices that almost all of the dates and items in the manifest are blacked out. This gives Edward the idea that someone is hiding something in the warehouse, so he decides to go investigate. However, before gaining access, he is stopped by a local gang of bootleggers and their leader, Kat. She tells him that she sometimes uses the warehouse for her business and that it would be best for him if he would stop snooping around. They eventually come to terms, however, and she allows him to enter the warehouse on the grounds that he stay out of her business. Edward agrees, as he has no interest outside of the Hawkins case. He goes in, and while investigating, finds some medicine, which is strange because no one should have been in there, and a painting which should have been burned along with the manor. When he goes to leave, he is stopped by a couple of police officers, including Bradley, who, upon learning that Edward is investigating the old Hawkins case, agrees to take him up to the Hawkins manor so that he can investigate further. When they're arriving at the Hawkins manor, they're greeted by the caretaker, Silas, who lets them in while they investigate. While investigating, they determine that the fire was caused by a lamp which was thrown at someone, and that at least one person managed to escape the fire. While investigating the upstairs, they run into a stranger in a cloak. He manages to escape into Charles's study, and from there he manages to get out of the building. However, they don't know how. However, it's shortly discovered that there is a series of tunnels running underneath the manor, with an access to it being in Charles Hawkins' study behind a bookcase. They go into the tunnels, they explore, and they manage to stumble upon a cult engaged in some sort of ritual. Bradley gets closer in order to see what's going on better and alerts one of the members, which is revealed to be a very mutated Charles Hawkins, whose half of his face and at least one of his arms is very squid-like. He manages to disembowel Bradley with next to no effort. Pierce is next on the menu, however he manages to escape before being caught in a rock slide that earns him a trip to the Riverside Institute. Dr. Fuller manages to save his life before stuffing him in the basement along with in the mental institution that he has under Riverside. Pierce manages to escape with the help of Marie Colden. In the process of his escape, he meets another person who is interred there named Francis Sanders. Upon witnessing his death and escaping, he makes his way back to the Hawkins Manor, where he come up with a game plan. Pierce decides to investigate Francis Sanders' last words, which were about Sarah Hawkins' visitor, or shambler. He goes to Francis Sanders' house, talks to his wife, who says that the shambler is a painting in the gallery. Edward goes to look at the painting before noticing that there's a creature coming out of it. He engages in a fight with the creature before ultimately defeating it and sending it back to where it came from, at least temporarily. However, his arm begins to turn the same color the creature was turning as it was being sucked back into the painting, and he is about to stab his hand. However, Kat, who has business with Irene Sanders, walks in at that point and stops him from stabbing himself in the hand, stating that she is protecting her goods. After learning that the dagger he used to send the creature back to where it came from one Algernon Drake, he decides to visit him at his bookstore called the Nameless Bookstore. Pierce arrives and finds that somebody has broken in. There's blood and there's a safe that's been attempted to break into. Upon doing a reconstruction scene and figuring out and finding all the clues to open the safe, he discovers the Necronomicon, which shows him the life of Marie Colden as she goes about her business trying to discover what exactly that Dr. Fuller is doing to the patients at Riverside. After doing some investigating and seeing Marie's death at the hands of Dr. Fuller, the Necronomicon pushes Pierce back into his body, where he is accosted by Algernon Drake, returning to his bookstore, thinking Pierce is the one that was trying to break into his store and steal the Necronomicon. However, Pierce manages to convince him that it was not him, but rather Charles Hawkins. Fearing for Marie Colden's life after the vision he just saw from the Necronomicon, Pierce rushes over to the Riverside Institute in an attempt to save Marie's life. Fearing that he may be too late, he tries to sneak past the guards, but is teleported into another world by the Shambler. He navigates a series of corridors that don't follow any logic known in our reality. After successfully evading the Shambler, Pierce manages to get back into the lower levels of the basement, where he discovers that he is too late, as Dr. Fuller is already operating on Marie Colden's body. Upon seeing this, he attempts to kill Dr. Fuller before the corpse jumps up and shoves him off. When he regains consciousness, Dr. Fuller is gone and the corpse is still there on the table in the same position it was before he was knocked out, leading him to think that he is losing his mind. After this, upon exploring the Riverside Institute more, Pierce discovers that Sarah Hawkins is indeed alive and being held there. He finds her, manages to save her, however she refuses to leave until he destroys the machine pumping green gas in everywhere, because it's not good for living beings. He agrees to do this, and after a fire is set to the machine, Charles Hawkins shows up in an attempt to once again recapture Sarah and kill Edward for, in his view, trying to take his wife and his life, because his family is already gone. Together, they manage to kill him once and for all, despite his unnatural strength, and make it back to their manor, where he, Algernon Drake, and Sarah attempt to form a plan by finding the key of Relia in an effort to in order to stop the Shambler, because she refuses to leave Darkwater until she puts right what she's done wrong. Here, Pierce has the option to inform Bradley whether or not he wants to. Pierce has the option to inform Bradley that Marie died, or choose not to. Upon finding the key of Relia, Pierce is arrested, and Algernon and Sarah go off on their own to stop the Shambler. While Pierce is in the jail, he is shown a vision by Leviathan of Sarah Hawkins and Algernon Drake attempting to stop Leviathan. No, not Leviathan, sorry, the Shambler. He sees them arriving at a cave used by the bootleggers. Sarah Hawkins climbs down a ladder into the cave and sees a bunch of dead bootleggers thrown everywhere, and upon reaching one of the exits to the cave, sees Kat herself fleeing by locking the rest of them in there with the Shambler, thinking that will keep her safe. After witnessing it kill another man, Sarah and Algernon Drake set up a protective circle at the base of the cave, and Sarah sets off to find the runes while Algernon stays in his little safety bubble. After disabling all three of the runes that the Shambler is using to remain in our dimension, Sarah uses her power to once again finally sever its connection to our world through the painting. However, doing this, she loses her free will. Upon re-entering his body, Edward is greeted once again by Leviathan with his offer for knowledge, and no offer to really refuse this time. No matter what the answer Edward gives is, the door opens and he is greeted to scenes from three of the characters in the game, Bradley, Sarah, and Kat, and some more about their supposed true intentions. After this, Edward is once again taken out of his body and put into that of Kat's, where he sees her going about her day-to-day life, including interrogating people who might have put a dead body of a police officer in her warehouse. So she goes to investigate and see if it's really true. Upon finding out that he's dead and attempting to figure out what exactly happened, The townsfolk go crazy and begin attacking everyone in sight that isn't like them. This includes Kat and her lieutenant. Kat manages to kill them and somehow escape, though wounded, which is not found out until the next chapter. And Edward is once again taken back to his body, where he is let out of his cell by Bradley, who is in the process of being possessed, giving him a gun and begging him to kill him. Edward then, regardless of whether or not Edward grants Bradley's wish, he leaves the police station with a gun, able to shoot the townsfolk if they attack him. Edward has the choice to save either Mitchell or Kat. However, no matter who he chooses to save, they give him a key to the whaling station, which is where he needs to go to stop the cult. Upon sneaking around all the insane townsfolk and reaching the whaling station, Edward has to solve several puzzles in order to get in, including how to break down the door using the tank. He also discovers along the way that Fuller, Charles Hawkins, and Fitzroy were all part of the crew of the Scylla, even though that was a long time ago, and are somehow immortal, basically. And they were among the crew to find Leviathan, aka Cthulhu. After finding this out, Edward is basically the plaything of Cthulhu for a short time, where he is offered choices, and depending on Edward's sanity, he can refuse them and actually succeed in refusing them, or refuse them and just be forced to do it anyways, or just doing it anyways. So, yeah, that's the thing. Cthulhu's a real nice guy, ain't he? After getting free of Cthulhu's grip, he has to run out of the warehouse as it is basically falling apart for some reason, because Edward, in one of his hallucinations, manages to set fire to the warehouse. Or the whaling station, rather. After running and nearly escaping, he is stopped by the cult, who mysteriously showed up. One of the members of the group there revealed to be Fitzroy. Fitzroy tells him that they're not here to fight, and that they're really there to extend the olive branch, because he is apparently the truth seeker, the one needed to fulfill their destiny. And yeah, basically they don't want to kill him because he is the key to bringing back their god or something. And well, Edward winds up falling into his tank and waking up in a strange place. After exploring for the strange place for a bit, Edward manages to find possibly the ghost or the hallucination of Mary Colden, who tells him that, well, basically things are not as he is, and he should give up and just submit himself to the madness. And Edward can either give in or refuse, and either way, the conversation is done after a short while, and Edward is forced to continue down the only path to a place called Alabaster Point, where Sarah Hawkins is waiting for him to create the destiny that they need to create. Upon reaching Alabaster Point, Edward tries to go up the mountain, but is stopped every now and then by hallucinations of people, including Dr. Fuller talking to himself, and Charles Hawkins telling him that he had no right to interfere. Upon reaching it, Edward is granted a choice of either participating in the ritual, performing a counter-ritual, or just, refusing. Wait, no, did I say refusing twice? He has the ability to either participate, refuse, or perform a counter-ritual. And depending on your choice, you will get a different ending each time. And, well, that's really it, because I don't really want to give away the different endings without spoiling them, so I guess that's it for the story. After that, we'll move on to the skills. We'll talk about the skills, I guess, and also the other gameplay mechanics. Yep, that's what we're doing next. So I don't really feel like there is a whole lot to say about the gameplay, because it's not really the main focus of this game. The main focus is the story. A lot of what you actually do in the game, though, is you sneak around enemies when there are enemies. You look around various locations that you find in the game, and you look for hidden things that help you learn more about what's going on in Darkwater, all while trying to manage Edward's increasingly falling apart sanity. Really, though, unless you're exploring every single nook and cranny of the game, most of your time spent playing this game is going to be in one of the various cutscenes or conversations with the other characters, because that's really the focus of the game, is the story itself, not the actual like gameplay. And that's all I really feel like there is to say about the gameplay. And I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, it works for, I feel like it works for what this game was trying to do. And you know, that's the important thing here, is it works for what they were going for. And it does bring me, however, to one of the more interesting mechanics in the game, and that is the skills that they use. At various points in the game, you get character points to invest in these skills, and the more you have in them, the more paths are unlocked. For example, investigation will allow you to pick locks, whereas eloquence will allow you to talk people into giving you more information. Strength will allow you to break things open and, you know, strong arm people into giving you information. Psychology helps you understand people better. Spot hidden helps you, well, you know, I mean, a lot of these are self-explanatory, like, you know, spot hidden and, well, all of them really are self-explanatory, but, you know, they do come in handy, and I think it's interesting the way they decided to go about using it, because, you can still beat the game without investing points in any of them, really, but they do help you a whole lot if you do decide to invest in them, and I love that they did that. I'm really glad that they did that, because I think it's just really interesting. It's one of my favorite things about the game, really, is the uh, the skills. That's, I think, all I really have to say about the gameplay and the mechanics. Well, next up I wanted to talk about the characters, but I feel like there are really too many characters to give each one the full, proper look that they probably really deserve. So instead, I'm just going to say about the characters this. I don't really feel like there's any character that's out of place or that doesn't, like, you know, fit. I guess that's the same thing. But I don't really feel like there's any character that's just needs to be removed or would change any, or like it would be the same if they were removed. Like, I just feel like all the characters do a good job at playing the part they need. So since I didn't really have much to say about the characters, I'd like to talk about instead some of the world building in this game. I think it does a great job at world building. I mean, it even goes as far as to have like little details like the bartender of the now what was it, the Beached Whale, I think the pub was called. You know, he arguably doesn't really need to be there, but him being there adds like a little bit of a detail, because you know that's where a private investigator would likely go to get more information, is a bar, and you know that's exactly what you can do with Edward. He doesn't really like contribute to the overall main story of the game, but you know he does a good job. And then like all the books that add to the suspense of like what happened in this island's past, like the pastor's wife's diary and the history of Darkwater and all the characters. Like, I just really love the feeling that you get from all the little things that they put into this game that you really might not even notice when you play through, but when you do, I feel like it gives you a better understanding of just what's going on and why things are the way they are. And I just feel like whoever was in charge of putting all those little details everywhere, I feel like they did a good job. I feel like there was a good job with the writing of the story of the game. I feel like the characters did a good job. I feel like the people who portrayed the characters did a good job voicing them. I don't really have a problem with any of that. I think they did a good job with all of that, really. I don't really have anything to say. I'm not well versed. I can't like get into the technical details, but I just feel like they did a good job. I think I just hit my mic. If so, I am sorry, but I mean that's all I really can think of to say about the game. So I guess I'll just move on to my final thoughts, really. I know I really don't feel like I've said enough about the other things, but really, this is a game where the story is the most important thing, and I don't really know what else to say about the story other than I found it really interesting, really captivating. Even though I know the story and it doesn't really change much each playthrough, the story is probably going to have me coming back for a third playthrough down the line, just because I find it really interesting. Like, if their goal was to just hook you from the start, I'm probably going to be hooked for years to come. So I think they did a great job with the story, with maybe one exception. I wasn't completely satisfied with the endings. I mean, in a way, they felt almost anticlimactic to me, but that's just me. Like it was interesting. I got a different ending than I did the first time I played through the game. It was sad. It was very different. Because the first ending I got was this ending called the Counter Ritual, and I'm not really going to spoil it, but I feel like out of all the endings I've heard about, it is like the most interesting. But I don't really know if I would really say I was satisfied with getting it, and I don't really know if what I've read about the other endings is true, if I'd really be 100% satisfied with them. So, like, I feel like the story was great, with the possible exception of the ending. I don't know. Maybe after reflecting on it more, I'll change my mind and decide that I loved the ending that I got and that I loved the other endings. I don't know, but as of right now, I can't say that I feel like I was 100% satisfied with the ending. Other than that, the story was amazing. I was really captivated all the way through, and I mean, I really would love to see more stuff like not necessarily like, oh, set in the Call of Cthulhu universe or anything, but I would like to see more like video game adaptations of the tabletop game. I think you could get some really creative ideas, and I feel like this is proof that you could get some really interesting ideas out of that kind of game, and I really would love to see more kind of similar to it. I'm sure there is stuff out there, I just haven't like found it yet or noticed it or whatever, but yeah, I mean, I guess that sums up my thoughts on like the story and all that stuff, so I'll move on to my final thoughts about the game as a whole. So overall, I really feel like this is a great game. I really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed playing through it the first time. I enjoyed playing through it the second time. In the future, I know I'm going to enjoy playing through it a third time. There are a few things that I kind of wish were different, like the ending, again, felt kind of lackluster to me. I guess that's the best word for that. Like, it didn't feel like it lived up to me anyways, what I expected the ending of the game to be with everything that had been happening. It's just like you get the Shambler, you defeat it, and then like you get to the end of the game, and it's just like, oh, that's it, that's the end. It's over, I guess. Hooray, you won, kind of. And there were a few moments where I felt like maybe Edward's voice actor kind of sounded a bit weird, but that might just be me, so I'm not gonna hold it too much against the game. But you know, it had a really interesting story, good characters, good acting. I don't really feel like there's too much I could personally find fault with in this game. And if you're looking for a game that's really story and character driven and not necessarily like a lot of doesn't necessarily have a lot of gameplay variety, I would definitely recommend this, because if you enjoy like really story driven games, then odds are you will probably love this game a lot. And if that's the case, then I really cannot recommend this enough, because it is a good story driven game, and I would highly recommend it to anyone that loves games like that, because you will probably most likely not be disappointed if you picked up a copy of this. And that's it. That's all I really have to say. I do have a sort of announcement I guess I'd like to make at the end of this video. I think I'm going to be taking a break from recording just for the rest of the year, you know, since it's the holidays and there's a lot going on. So I'm probably going to be back to doing this probably no later than the second week of January. But I may or may not upload a lot less frequently, because I have more classes next semester than I had this semester. Last semester I had 3 classes because one got dropped. Next semester I'm going to have 5, so I'm not really going to have a whole lot of free time. So videos may become less frequent, and I'm going to be taking, I definitely am going to be taking a break until at no later than the second week of January. And by that I mean I'm going to try and get back to it by the second week of January. Just in case I worded that weirdly, because I'm not good with words. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good rest of the year, and I hope you'll join me for whatever lies on the next horizon, whether it be lasers of death or arrows of death or just anything of death, really, because that's what I'm going for here, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to be funny. Uh, Anyways, really, I hope you guys have a great rest of the year, and I hope you'll join me on whatever we're doing next.